Thank you for coming in today.
Great to be here, John.
As we are taping this, I haven't seen you in a while. It's good to have you in the studio. Democrats wrapping up their convention. Let me just start with the most topical thing. I wrote down the quote. John Kennedy, the senator, said he called it a baloney blizzard. He's always interesting with his descriptions. Are you watching it all, the Democrats and what they're doing, and what's your reaction to how this week's going for them?
So I've been watching it like the rest of Americans, but what I'm hearing from my constituents is they continue to be concerned about the inflation crisis, prices at the grocery store, they're concerned about the border crisis, and the American people are smart. They know that it's a direct result of failed policies of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and on those top two issues, Kamala Harris was designated as Biden's border czar, so she is responsible for the millions of illegals who have poured into this country. And it's impacted every district, including mine in upstate New York. And then on the inflation piece, if you look at Joe Biden's hallmark legislative victory, it was the Inflation Expansion Act. The deciding vote that passed that was Kamala Harris, because the VP cast the deciding vote. So notice they're not discussing that aspect of her record at the convention, but the American people are smart, and it's our responsibility as policymakers to talk about the differences of 4 years ago when the economy was booming under President Trump. The world was at peace, and we had the most secure border in our nation's history versus where we are today.
If you go back 5-6 weeks, it looked like things were fantastic for the GOP. All the polls had it going for Donald Trump against Biden. Did it bother you a little bit that they did this switch right before the convention and got him out and got her in, or is it all fair in politics?
Well, it is certainly unprecedented, and the media hasn't given a second glance. I appreciate you asking that question, because this is the first time ever that there's been a candidate for the President of the United States without a single vote cast among primary voters. So no Democrat primary voters across the country were able to make their voices heard, and they just swapped out Kamala Harris. So while the media tends to attack Republicans for attacking democracy, we are fighting to save democracy, to save our constitutional republic. And there's nothing more undemocratic than swapping out one candidate for another without anyone being able to vote.
I know you don't want to criticize the person at the top of your ticket, but was it a tactical error on Trump's part doing that debate so early? Because it's what set all this in motion, where Biden has the bad night, the party sort of panics, and now here we are, and now all of a sudden the polls are even in a lot of states.
No, I don't think it was a tactical error. Look, President Trump has always said he'll debate anytime, anywhere. And in Kamala Harris's case, he has challenged her to 3 debates. She's refusing to do any of the additional debates other than the one that she's negotiated. So it's important for the American people to see at the presidential level, when it's a neck-and-neck race, to really make a decision on the next president. And boy, did President Trump win that debate. And the world saw what we have known for well over, I would say, 2 years, that Joe Biden is physically and mentally unfit for office, and yet the media would not allow us and would criticize those of us who spoke out about that, saying, oh, no, you can't, you're being ageist. We're just talking about facts that matter, and the rest of the world sees that as well in a weak commander-in-chief.
It seems like when former President Trump talks about things like the border, grocery prices, he's going to win when he stays in those boxes, but sometimes being Trump being Trump, he'll talk about things outside that become just red meat for the media to talk about. Do you sometimes want to call him up and say, please stay on message and don't wander off and start making comments about the way people look or nicknames or those kind of things?
Well, President Trump is always on message on the issues. What's interesting to me is at the various rallies and events that I've participated in, which are very many at this point, in support of President Trump, he'll talk about all these substantive policy issues. He'll talk about his record. He'll talk about his plans in his second term. And then when we read the news coverage after the fact, they don't even cover the policies that he's discussed. Every single rally, every single event that he does, he talks in depth about border security policies. So returning to his successful policies, ending catch and release, restoring remain in Mexico, building the border wall, supporting Border Patrol, compared with what we have today, which on day one, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris opened the border wide open. He talks about inflation policies with strong economic growth. Remember, he passed the historic tax cuts. He supported Made in America manufacturing. He supported farms across this country. That's particularly important for my district. So he is focused on the substance. We win on the substance. That's why the mainstream media at the national level is so focused on covering anything but the substance of the issues.
They're certainly presenting at the convention Kamala as a new choice, different than what was there before, without throwing Biden under the bus, so to speak. as a Republican, does it bother you that you're saying, do you want to wave a flag and say, wait, she's been there for 4 years, so if there's nothing new. When they talk about day one, we're going to do this, where they've had their day one already, and it was 1,000 days ago.
Right. They did have their day one. Kamala Harris is Joe Biden's open border czar. She was the deciding vote for the Inflation Expansion Act, which is causing this very painful inflation. She has taken the position to defund the police, prioritizing criminals over law-abiding citizens. That's really important for voters across this country of all political backgrounds who are concerned about this skyrocketing of crime. She owns those positions. It's amazing to watch the media try to wipe that away. And the other thing that's interesting is she was viewed as the worst vice president in my lifetime, unable to do interviews, unable to tackle substantive issues, and then now to be presented as a presidential candidate when you're unable to be an effective vice president, that's a bridge too far, I think, for voters.
How has your life as a congresswoman changed? When you and I first met 10 years ago down in your office, you were, I think, 29. You'd just gotten in. You were the youngest, and I think Ocasio-Cortez ended up taking that title from you, being the youngest woman elected. But I remember back in those days, I was kind of dealing with one PR person, and now now that you've got a much bigger role in the party, you must be a much bigger target as well. I mean, do you see the things on social media, or do you just try to shut the door and not look at the things? Because you certainly must become a target.
Well, certainly I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue to be the voice for New York's 21st Congressional District. That's my #1 professional job. And I'm blessed that my colleagues, that is House Republicans, elected me to serve as their conference chair. I'm the highest ranking woman in the United States Congress, and it's the first time that a New York Republican has been in top elected leadership in 100 years, John. So to give this district a seat at the highest level, it's just an honor of my lifetime, and I'm able to deliver significant results to this district. Are there, people that target us online and otherwise? There are, but I realize that I work for my 700,000 constituents who I represent, and I'm really honored to earn overwhelmingly their support election cycle after election cycle. And yes, the Democrats always tend to import some radical from New York City who has no ties to upstate New York, but we have consistently showed that we're able to earn not just Republican votes, but also we win independents, and we win about 20% of registered Democrats in my district.
Well, New York played a big role with those congressional seats flipping the last time around. We're already seeing a lot of money come into New York and upstate New York for some of these congressional seats. Usually we're such a blue state, it doesn't matter, but now it does matter, doesn't it, nationally? There's a lot of races here, congressionally speaking, that it could go either way, and we're going to see a lot of outside money coming in, right?
Yes, and you point out the road to the majority runs right through New York. That has been the case actually every election cycle, but in 2010 and 2022, the last two times it's flipped from Democrat to Republican, no state has picked up more congressional seats than New York State for Republicans. So we are ground zero in terms of defending the House. The good news is we have fair district lines. I was the leader in terms of making sure that we had a strong legal process and strategy to have fair district lines, not just to promote Republicans, but to make sure New Yorkers had a fair voice representing their communities. We have strong candidates in Mark Molinaro in the Upper Hudson Valley, like Mike Lawler in the Lower Hudson Valley. You have Brandon Williams in Syracuse, and we swept Long Island, which is increasingly becoming Republican. And it's also interesting, nationally there is a phenomenon that Republicans are doing better and better in blue states like New York and California, because people are seeing the double whammy of bad federal policies from Democrats at the federal level, coupled with catastrophic state policies with unified Democrat government. So that's given us an opportunity to show we're the party of common sense and results.
And dialing back a little bit, when Donald Trump was looking for a vice presidential candidate, every shortlist I seem to see that had more than 2 names on it. If it got to between 3 and 4 or 5 names, Elise Stefanik was popping up on there, maybe behind J.D. Vance and a couple others. Were you flattered by that? Did it ever get to a point where you were being vetted or having conversations with people? Or where was your stance on all that?
Well, first of all, it was an honor to be considered. It was an honor to be the finalist, the only woman who was in the group of finalists. We have a lot of great talent in the Republican Party, and I'm friends with and have worked with all of the names that were mentioned on the big list and also as the list got smaller. The campaign, of course, did vetting, and what an honor for me to be considered. I just turned 40 years old this year, John, so 10 years of experience, but also I continue to have a very strong relationship with President Trump, and I think he's campaigning hard with J.D. Vance. J.D. is also quite young. He's working hard. He tells a great American story in terms of his background and his life story. And there's lots of ways to serve, so I'm really looking forward to continuing my job currently in New York's 21st Congressional District to help save this country and help elect President Trump.
Your name recognition went off the charts, I don't know how many months ago it was now, when the college presidents came into a hearing and you asked them point blank about anti-Semitism and policies of school. Isn't this a violation? Were you surprised how that took off and really resonated with a lot of people, your questions and how they were answered?
I was not surprised after sitting in that hearing. What surprised me was just how morally bankrupt the question or the answers were from those university presidents, two of whom are now former university presidents, along with Columbia. So Harvard and Penn's presidents were fired as a result of that committee hearing. And it was a very straightforward question. It was not a question I prepared. I had not gotten direct answers for them throughout the hearing, and it was the last question. Almost no one was in the hearing room, and it was this: does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? That's an easy yes answer. You ask any of my constituents, they know the answer is yes. A farmer, a mom, a manufacturer, they know the correct answer is yes. And to have the presidents of the supposed most elite universities, one of which I graduated from, hesitate and say it depends on the context, the world heard. Interestingly, though, they did not realize what they were saying was so morally wrong, but it really created an earthquake that has been long overdue in higher education. We have to get back to educating our kids, not to sharing far-left propaganda. We had an attempt on the former president's life. It seemed like for about 10 minutes the rhetoric got dialed down. Would you like to see both sides stop with the comments of, if this person gets elected, it's the end of the world, that kind of thing? Because yeah, the average person knows it's hyperbole, but somebody who's maybe not all there sees that and thinks, well, I'm going to act on this. I have to do the right thing and stop this person. Well, we need to condemn any calls for political violence. And there's been an instance in my district where you had a Democrat council from a town from Potsdam in St. Lawrence County in my district who compared the assassination attempt against President Trump as putting down a rabid dog. What is important, though, is elected officials of both parties condemned that rhetoric. So it's very important for us to condemn any calls for political violence. There's going to be a robust discussion of the issues, as there should be. The American people want to hear about these policies and want, a vision to save this country, but there should be no tolerance for any calls of political violence. In terms of the assassination attempt, it's very important for us to continue to ask tough questions of the Secret Service for why there was a failure to protect the perimeter. Initially, their first response was to blame local law enforcement. It turns out that local law enforcement, as far as we know, had provided concerns about the perimeter. So that's why that congressional committee is so important, to get those answers, to make sure that we can protect candidates for the highest office, not just in this country, but the leader of the free world. And final minute or so, we'll circle back to the beginning. What does Donald Trump have to do to win this race, in your opinion? Donald Trump will win this race focused on the issues which he is doing, focused on securing the border, focused on growing the economy and stopping this runaway inflation, focusing on peace through strength, which he delivered. I worked very closely with him on national security issues since I represent Fort Drum. The world was at peace. Compare it to today, where you have the Middle East engulfed in terrorist attack from Hamas against our most precious ally, Israel. You had Putin invading Ukraine, and of course the catastrophic withdrawal from Afghanistan. So we win on the issues, and we need to make sure that we have a secure election that is constitutional and according to election integrity. We work on that in New York State, and I know that you have folks across this country that are making sure that every legal vote is counted, but only the legal votes. Got you. And last question, if I have you back here in 10 years, assuming I'm still around here, am I going to be talking to Speaker of the House Stefanik or presidential candidate Stefanik? I don't know, John. I take it every 2 years. I never thought I would be elected to Congress, let alone be in leadership in the United States Congress, let alone be considered for vice president. So I try to do the best job I can every day, as well as being the best mom I can be to my son, Sam. Who's turning 3 in a couple days. Who's turning 3. Fantastic. Congratulations on that, by the way. Thank you. I think it all goes back to Academy for Girls, when you were campaigning on getting a vending machine for the girls. That's right. And we delivered that, and they were able to, pay for some of the middle school student council budget. Doritos can get you a lot of votes, I think, right? Yes. All right. Elise Stefanik, thank you so much for coming in. We appreciate it. Thank you.